Previously, 17-year-old Marcus Chen, homeless and alone after his grandfather's death, performed a simple act of kindness by helping a stranded Hell's Angel named Jake Morrison repair his motorcycle so Jake could make it to his estranged daughter's wedding. The next morning, 120 Hell's Angels arrived at the gas station to thank Marcus, showering him with money, food, and most importantly, Jake's offer of a job at his Sacramento garage. Now, with a business card in his pocket and hope in his heart, for the first time in months, Marcus begins the journey toward what might finally be home. The Greyhound bus exhales diesel fumes and resignation as it pulls away from the Seattle station, leaving Marcus pressed against a cracked vinyl seat that smells of disinfectant and broken dreams, watching the city shrink into gray smudges through rain-streaked windows. His backpack sits in his lap like a faithful dog, protecting the most valuable thing he owns, not the roll of bills the angels pressed into his hands, though that money represents more security than he's known since his grandfather's funeral, but Jake Morrison's business card, now laminated in plastic he bought from a corner store, because some things are too precious to risk losing to the casual cruelty of weather and time. The other passengers occupy their own islands of solitude, each wrapped in the particular exhaustion that comes from traveling by bus, because it's the only option left, not because it's the preferred one. An elderly woman clutches a plastic shopping bag full of prescription bottles, her lips moving in silent conversation with someone only she can see. A young mother bounces a crying baby while trying to quiet a toddler whose energy seems inversely proportional to the space available to contain it. And Marcus catches her eye once in the overhead mirror, offering the kind of understanding smile that says he knows what it's like to travel with more problems than luggage. She smiles back, grateful for any acknowledgement that she's doing her best in circumstances that weren't designed with her success in mind. The bus stops every few hours at stations that could have been designed by the same architect of despair, concrete buildings with fluorescent lights that flicker like dying stars, vending machines that eat your money and return nothing but mechanical indifference, restrooms that serve as reminders that dignity is a luxury not everyone can afford. At each stop, Marcus watches passengers disembark into the arms of people who've been waiting for them, families whose faces light up with the joy of reunion, and he tries not to think about the fact that no one in Sacramento knows he's coming, that Jake's offer might have been just politeness dressed up as possibility. During the long stretch through Oregon's emptiness, Marcus finds himself sitting next to a truck driver named Earl, who's heading to Portland to see his granddaughter's first piano recital, his weathered hands showing photographs of a gap-toothed 8-year-old whose smile could power cities. "Been driving for 37 years, Earl says, his voice carrying the rhythm of highway hypnosis and CB radio conversations. "And I can tell you something about people, son. The ones worth knowing are the ones who help strangers. And the ones worth helping are the ones who appreciate it without making it into something bigger than it needs to be." He studies Marcus with eyes that have seen America from the cab of a semi-truck, cataloging the subtle signs that separate travelers from runaways, hope from desperation. "You got the look of someone heading towards something instead of running away from it. That's good. Means whatever's waiting for you in Sacramento, you're ready to meet it head on." The landscape rolls past in a blur of evergreen forests and small towns that look like movie sets for stories about people whose biggest problems are teenagers staying out past curfew and deciding which college to attend. And Marcus finds himself cataloging the differences between this new world and the urban maze of Seattle streets where he learned to become invisible, to read the dangerous currents in a crowd's movement, to survive on the kindness of strangers who had little kindness left to spare. His reflection in the window shows a face that's still too thin, eyes that have seen too much. But there's something different now, a straightness in his shoulders that wasn't there a week ago, a set to his jaw that speaks of purpose instead of mere survival. Sacramento announces itself first as a smudge of brown air against the horizon, then as a sprawl of suburbs and strip malls that gradually thickens into something resembling a real city, complete with homeless camps under overpasses that make Marcus's chest tighten with recognition and sympathy. He knows those blue tarps and shopping cart barricades, understands the careful geography of survival that maps safe places to sleep against the territories claimed by those who've given up on ever sleeping safely again, and he silently promises the strangers below that if Jake's offer proves real, if this isn't just another cruel joke played by a universe that specializes in building people up just to watch them fall, he'll find ways to pay forward what's been given to him. Morrison's motorcycle repair squats between a taqueria and a pawn shop on Auburn Boulevard like a grease-stained cathedral, its hand-painted sign weathered but proud. Windows that haven't been washed in years, but somehow still manage to glow with warm yellow light that spills across motorcycles in various states of resurrection. Marcus stands across the street for 20 minutes, watching men in coveralls move between the bikes with the fluid precision of surgeons, their hands speaking the mechanical language his grandfather taught him in that garage behind the house on Elm Street, before a lifetime of caution and 3 months of living rough make him second-guess everything. What if Jake was just being polite? What if the whole thing was some elaborate joke? A way for the angels to feel good about helping the poor homeless kid without actually following through? What if Marcus shows up and Jake doesn't even remember him? Just another face in a blur of people who've asked for help over the years. His fingers find the business card through his jacket pocket, tracing its familiar edges while his courage wages war with experience. And he's actually turning to walk away when a voice cuts through the street noise like a perfectly tuned engine. You planning to stand there all day? Or are you going to come inside and let me show you around your new job? Jake Morrison emerges from the garage, wiping his hands on a red rag, his silver hair catching afternoon sunlight like a beacon, and the smile that transforms his weathered features erases every doubt that's been gnawing at Marcus's confidence since Seattle. This isn't the desperate man from the gas station, or even the proud leader who arrived with an army of motorcycles. This is Jake at home, in his element, surrounded by the mechanical challenges and possibilities that give his life meaning. And when he crosses the street to wrap Marcus in another of those bear hugs that smell like motor oil and safety, the teenager finally understands that some promises are kept simply because good people exist in a world that often forgets to reward goodness. Sarah sends her thanks, Jake says as he leads Marcus across Auburn Boulevard, navigating between cars with the confidence of a man who's been dodging traffic since before Marcus was born. Showed her your picture from my phone, told her the whole story, and she cried right there in her wedding dress. Says she's got a guardian angel who looks like he needs some taking care of himself. The garage welcomes them with the symphony Marcus has been homesick for without realizing it. The whisper of compressed air, the percussion of wrenches against stubborn bolts, the bass notes of engines turning over after surgery, all of it mixing into the mechanical lullaby that sang him to sleep during those precious years when his grandfather's garage was the center of his universe. But this place is different from his grandfather's one-man operation, larger and more organized, with specialized work bays for different types of repairs and a parts room that looks like a mechanical library where every component has its proper place and purpose. The other mechanics look up from their work with expressions that range from curious to skeptical, their hands pausing mid-task, as Jake makes introductions that sound more like coronations. Boys, meet Marcus Chen, the young man who saved my relationship with my daughter, and probably my sanity along with it. He's going to be working with us, and I expect you to teach him everything you know, because from what I saw the other night, this kid's got more natural talent in his little finger than most mechanics develop in a lifetime. The words hang in the air thick with motor oil and possibility, while Marcus tries to make himself smaller, unused to being the center of attention for anything positive, but the faces around him soften into something that looks suspiciously like welcome. Rodriguez, a compact man with intricate tattoos covering arms that look strong enough to lift motorcycles barehanded, steps forward first. His ink tells stories of a life lived hard and survived harder, names of friends who didn't make it home, dates that mark transformations from one version of himself to another, symbols that speak of loyalties that transcend the ordinary boundaries of employment and friendship. Jake's told us a lot about you, hermano. Takes cajones to help a stranger when you got nothing, and it takes heart to refuse payment. We respect that here. His handshake is firm without being aggressive, and when he speaks again, his voice carries the warmth of someone who recognizes a kindred spirit. I've been where you are, living rough, wondering if tomorrow's going to be better or just different kinds of bad. It gets better when you got people watching your back. And Jake's people always watch each other's backs. Tommy Nakamura looks like he stepped out of a 1950s motorcycle magazine, his pompadour perfect despite the grease under his fingernails, and his grin reveals teeth that are startlingly white against oil-stained skin. The precision of his appearance extends to his workstation, where tools are arranged with military precision and every surface gleams despite the inevitable chaos of motorcycle repair. Hope you're ready to learn, kid, because Jake doesn't just hire mechanics, he adopts them. By Christmas, you'll be getting invited to barbecues and birthday parties and all the other stuff that comes with being part of the Morrison family. He gestures toward a partially disassembled Triumph Bonneville that sits like a mechanical skeleton waiting for resurrection. This beauty's been giving me grief for 2 weeks. Engine keeps seizing up right when it should be purring. Want to take a look? There's also Miguel Santos, quiet and methodical, whose scarred hands move with the precision of a surgeon, and whose knowledge of electrical systems borders on supernatural. He nods at Marcus with the reserved approval of someone who believes that competence speaks louder than words, and returns to tracing wiring harnesses with the patience of a monk illuminating manuscripts. In the corner, Diesel Thompson, a mountain of a man whose nickname reflects both his preferred fuel and his approach to life, wrestles with a Harley-Davidson Electra Glide that looks like it's been through several wars and lost most of them, his massive hands somehow gentle enough to coax life back into components that lesser mechanics would have declared hopeless. Marcus approaches the motorcycle with the reverence his grandfather taught him, running his hands over the engine block with fingers that read metal like Braille, feeling for the subtle wrongness that separates a sick machine from a healthy one. The other mechanics watch in silence as he traces fuel lines and checks connections, his movements becoming more confident as muscle memory takes over from conscious thought. And when he removes the head gasket to reveal scoring on the cylinder walls that speaks of overheating and neglect, the appreciative murmurs around him sound like applause. Whoever rode this baby was running her too hot for too long, Marcus murmurs, his voice taking on the professorial tone his grandfather used when explaining the intimate relationship between mechanical sympathy and proper maintenance. See these heat marks here? Engine was probably running lean, maybe a clogged jet in the carburetor restricting fuel flow. Fix the mixture, resurface the cylinder walls, replace the gasket, and she'll purr like she's supposed to. His hands move with increasing confidence as he points out the evidence, and when he looks up to find 5 experienced mechanics nodding with respect instead of skepticism, something inside his chest expands like an engine, finally getting the air it needs to breathe. Jake watches from the doorway to his office, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. But when Marcus catches his eye, there's something there that looks like pride mixed with satisfaction. The look of a man who's made a good bet and watched it pay off exactly as he hoped. Tommy, get Marcus set up with tools and a workstation. Rodriguez, show him how we do paperwork around here. Customer intake, time sheets, parts orders, all that administrative nonsense that keeps the lights on and the coffee hot. And everybody remember, this kid's been living rough for months, so if he seems tired or hungry or like he needs space, give it to him. We've all been broken in different ways, and part of healing is having people around who understand that broken doesn't mean worthless. The afternoon dissolves into a montage of mechanical education, with Marcus's hands relearning the weight of proper tools, while his mind absorbs the subtle differences between his grandfather's old-school techniques and the modern methods that make precision possible in ways the previous generation could only dream about. Rodriguez teaches him the garage's system for organizing parts and tracking inventory, a level of mechanical bureaucracy that would have driven his grandfather crazy, but makes perfect sense when you're responsible for fixing dozens of motorcycles instead of just tinkering with 1 or 2. The computer system tracks everything from oil changes to complete engine rebuilds, creating a digital history for each motorcycle that reveals patterns of failure and maintenance that help predict future problems before they strand riders on remote highways. Tommy shows him how to use the computerized diagnostic equipment that can peer into a motorcycle's electronic brain and diagnose problems that would have taken hours to find through trial and error, though both men emphasize that no computer can replace the intuition that comes from understanding machines as living things with personalities and preferences and individual quirks. The diagnostic machine speaks in numbers and codes, but Tommy teaches Marcus to translate that digital language into the mechanical poetry his grandfather would have understood. The difference between a sensor that's failing gradually and one that's been damaged by heat or vibration, the subtle variations in electrical resistance that reveal corrosion or wear, or the kind of abuse that comes from riders who mistake aggression for skill. Miguel Santos demonstrates the dark art of electrical troubleshooting, showing Marcus how to trace intermittent faults through miles of wiring that snake through frames and fairings like mechanical nervous systems. His scarred fingers move with surgical precision as he explains that electrical problems are like ghosts. They appear and disappear according to rules that seem arbitrary, but actually follow the inexorable logic of physics, temperature coefficients, and the gradual degradation of connections exposed to weather and vibration. Electricity is honest, Miguel says in his quiet voice, but it requires patience to understand its honesty. Rush the diagnosis, and you'll chase symptoms instead of causes, replacing parts until you go broke or get lucky. Diesel Thompson's approach to motorcycle repair resembles controlled violence, but Marcus soon realizes that the big man's seemingly crude methods mask a deep understanding of mechanical systems that can only come from decades of wrestling stubborn machines back to life. When a seized bolt refuses to yield to conventional methods, Diesel applies precisely the right amount of heat and leverage and mechanical sympathy to convince it to surrender without destroying the threads or the component it's supposed to hold together. Sometimes you gotta be firm with these old girls, he explains in a voice like gravel in a cement mixer. But firm ain't the same as mean. They'll tell you when they're ready to cooperate. And if you listen good, everybody goes home happy. But it's the human dynamics that surprise Marcus most. The way these mechanics, these men who could intimidate anyone just by walking into a room, treat each other with a gentleness that contradicts every stereotype about tough guys and motorcycle culture. When Rodriguez's arthritis flares up and makes it difficult for him to grip small parts, Tommy automatically takes over the detail work without being asked, without making it seem like charity or pity. When Tommy gets frustrated with a particularly stubborn bolt and starts cursing in languages Marcus doesn't recognize, Rodriguez appears with coffee and a different wrench and the kind of patient presence that diffuses anger before it can turn destructive. Miguel shares his specialized tools without being asked, understanding that complicated electrical problems require the right equipment, and that hoarding knowledge or resources weakens the entire team. Even Diesel, who looks like he could bench press motorcycles for entertainment, takes time to explain his techniques to Marcus, with the patience of a master craftsman passing secrets to an apprentice. They function like a family that's chosen each other instead of being stuck with biology. And watching them work together gives Marcus his first real glimpse of what it might mean to belong somewhere permanent. These men have histories: Rodriguez's prison tattoos and carefully controlled anger, Tommy's perfectionism that suggests military training, or obsessive-compulsive tendencies channeled into productive pursuits, Miguel's silence that could hide trauma, or simply preference for letting his work speak for itself, Diesel's gentle giant contradiction that probably covers pain he's never learned to articulate. But whatever brought them to this garage, whatever roads they traveled to arrive at this collection of work bays and tool chests and motorcycles in various stages of resurrection, they've built something here that transcends mere employment. Jake's office occupies the back corner of the garage, its walls covered with photographs that tell the story of a life lived on motorcycles and measured in friendships rather than bank balances. There are pictures of Jake and Sarah at various ages, her face changing from round-cheeked child to serious teenager to the radiant bride Marcus recognizes from the wedding photo, pinned prominently beside the desk. And interspersed with the family portraits are group shots of Hell's Angels gatherings that span decades, faces aging and changing, but the bonds between them remaining constant as gravity. A framed letter from Sarah sits on the desk, her handwriting expressing gratitude for the father who finally showed up when it mattered most. And Marcus realizes he's looking at the physical evidence of redemption, proof that people can change and relationships can heal and love can survive the mistakes that seemed unforgivable. The office also serves as a museum of mechanical history, with vintage motorcycle parts mounted on the walls like artifacts from a more romantic era of transportation. A 1947 knucklehead engine head serves as a bookend for repair manuals that date back to when motorcycles were simpler but no less mysterious, their mechanical hearts accessible to anyone willing to get their hands dirty and invest the time to understand the relationship between combustion and motion. Photographs of legendary motorcycles share wall space with certificates of achievement from motorcycle associations and trade organizations, testimony to Jake's reputation as someone who can resurrect machines that other mechanics declare hopeless. Behind the desk, a gun safe holds not weapons but the most valuable tools of the trade: precision instruments for measuring tolerances, specialty wrenches for motorcycles that haven't been manufactured in decades, micrometers and dial indicators that can detect variations measured in thousandths of an inch. These are the tools that separate craftsmen from parts replacers, the instruments that make it possible to rebuild engines to specifications tighter than they maintained when they rolled off the assembly line. Jake notices Marcus studying the safe and explains that some tools are too valuable to leave lying around, not because of their monetary worth, but because of the knowledge they represent, the accumulated wisdom of generations of mechanics who understood that precision is the difference between a repair that lasts and one that brings the customer back with the same problem 6 months later. "She wants to meet you," Jake says, noticing Marcus studying the wedding photograph. Says anyone who helped her dad become the man she always hoped he could be deserves a proper thank you, not just the hug she sent through me. He settles into the chair behind his desk with the careful movements of a man whose joints remember every mile of highway he's ever ridden. And when he looks at Marcus, there's a seriousness in his expression that wasn't there during the afternoon's mechanical instruction. The desk between them holds the detritus of a working life: invoices waiting for payment, parts catalogs marked with post-it notes, coffee cups that have been refilled so many times the ceramic has stained brown around the rim. But first we need to talk about practical things. You got a place to stay? Or were you planning to sleep in the park until you save up enough for a security deposit? The question hits Marcus like cold water, reminding him that despite the warmth of the afternoon and the unexpected acceptance he's found in this grease-scented sanctuary, he's still fundamentally homeless, still carrying everything he owns in a backpack that's held together with duct tape and stubborn optimism. His cheeks flush with embarrassment as he admits that he'd been planning to find a cheap motel until he could figure out something more permanent. And he can see in Jake's expression the exact moment when the older man decides that some problems require immediate solutions, regardless of pride or propriety. The admission feels like failure, like proof that he's still the charity case who needs rescuing, but Jake's face shows only the practical concern of someone who's been young and broke and understands that sometimes pride is a luxury you can't afford. "Rodriguez!" Jake calls out, his voice carrying easily over the mechanical symphony of the garage. "You still got that apartment above the shop that you're not using?" The response comes back in rapid Spanish, followed by English translation. The small studio apartment that Rodriguez had been saving for his nephew, who decided college in Los Angeles was more appealing than learning motorcycle repair in Sacramento. "It's not much," Jake explains to Marcus, "but it's clean and warm, and the shower works most of the time. And more importantly, it's walking distance from here, so you don't have to worry about transportation while you're getting back on your feet." Marcus opens his mouth to protest, to explain that he can't accept any more charity, that he needs to maintain some independence and dignity in a world that's been stripping both away from him for months. But Jake cuts him off with the gentle authority of someone who's had this conversation before. "Son, let me tell you something my daddy taught me back when I was young and stupid and too proud to accept help when it was offered. There's two kinds of charity in this world, the kind that makes you smaller and the kind that makes you stronger. When someone gives you something because they pity you, that's the first kind, and it hurts more than it helps. But when someone gives you something because they see your potential and want to help you reach it, that's the second kind, and turning it down doesn't make you noble, it just makes you lonely." The apartment exists in the awkward space between Rodriguez's mechanical dreams and practical reality. A studio that was supposed to house a nephew who would carry on the family tradition of understanding motorcycles, but ended up empty when that nephew chose textbooks over toolboxes. The walls are painted the optimistic yellow of someone who believes that the right color can make even small spaces feel like home. And the furniture consists of a bed that's actually just a mattress on a frame, but feels like luxury to someone who's been sleeping on concrete, a table with 2 chairs in case loneliness ever needs company, and a kitchenette that's compact but functional and smells faintly of the coffee. Rodriguez must have been drinking while he painted these walls and hoped for a future that chose a different path. The apartment's single window looks out over Auburn Boulevard, offering a view of Sacramento that encompasses both the urban sprawl stretching toward the Sierra foothills and the immediate neighborhood where Morrison's motorcycle repair has carved out its mechanical niche. From here, Marcus can see the taqueria where Rodriguez gets lunch every Tuesday, the pawn shop that sometimes has useful tools at reasonable prices, the bus stop where commuters wait with the patience of people who have learned to find peace in routine. The proximity to the garage means he can hear the sound of engines starting and motorcycles departing, a mechanical soundtrack that promises tomorrow will bring new challenges to solve, new problems to diagnose, new opportunities to prove that his grandfather's lessons weren't wasted on someone too young to appreciate their value at the time. Marcus sets his backpack on the table with the ceremony of a pioneer claiming territory, and for the first time in months, he allows himself to imagine waking up in the same place tomorrow that he goes to sleep tonight. The refrigerator hums with the contentment of an appliance that serves a purpose, and when he opens it to find that Rodriguez has stocked it with basic supplies, milk that doesn't expire for another week, bread that's soft instead of stale, eggs that represent the possibility of real breakfast instead of convenience store pastries, he has to sit down at the small table to absorb the magnitude of kindness that keeps surprising him in this new world where strangers become family through the simple act of paying attention to each other's needs. The shower, when he tests it, produces hot water that feels like a miracle against skin that's been making do with gas station bathrooms and public fountains, washing away not just the grime of travel, but the accumulated weight of months when cleanliness was a luxury he couldn't afford. The soap smells like ordinary soap instead of the harsh disinfectant of public restrooms, and the towel is clean and soft and big enough to wrap around his thin frame like a terry cloth embrace. When he catches sight of himself in the mirror afterward, clean for the first time in weeks, wearing clothes that aren't carrying the accumulated grime of survival, he sees someone who might actually have a future instead of just an endless string of tomorrows to endure. The evening light filtering through the yellow walls transforms the small space into something that feels suspiciously like sanctuary. And Marcus finds himself walking from the kitchenette to the bed to the window and back again, not from restlessness, but from the simple pleasure of having space to move through that belongs, at least temporarily, to him. He's never lived alone before. Went straight from his mother's chaotic apartment to his grandfather's organized home, to the streets where privacy was impossible and safety required constant vigilance. And the silence of his own space feels both liberating and slightly terrifying. The garage settles into evening quiet as the sun disappears behind Sacramento's skyline, casting long shadows through windows that turn the work bays into cathedrals of chrome and steel. Marcus walks through the space that will become familiar, memorizing the locations of tools and parts, the personalities of the motorcycles waiting for resurrection, the rhythm of a place where mechanical problems have mechanical solutions, and the only mysteries are the ones that can be solved with patience and skill, and the willingness to get your hands dirty in service of making something broken work again. Jake finds him standing beside the Triumph Bonneville, running his fingers over the engine components he'd diagnosed that afternoon. And there's something in the older man's expression that suggests this moment has been inevitable since that night at the gas station when a homeless teenager chose kindness over self-preservation. "You remind me of myself at your age," Jake says quietly, his voice carrying over the distant hum of traffic on Auburn Boulevard. Lost, angry, convinced the world was designed to break people like us and leave us scattered by the roadside. Took me 20 years and a daughter who refused to give up on me to learn that broken doesn't mean worthless. That sometimes the best people are the ones who've been cracked open by life and learned to let the light in. The words settle between them like a benediction, and Marcus feels something inside his chest that he thought had died with his grandfather. The recognition of being truly seen by someone who understands the weight of carrying yourself when the world seems determined to knock you down. "My grandfather used to say that motorcycles were honest," he says, surprising himself by offering this piece of his history to someone who's proven worthy of holding it carefully. He said they'd tell you exactly what was wrong with them if you knew how to listen, and that fixing them was just a matter of having the patience to hear what they were trying to say. Jake nods with the satisfaction of someone who's discovered that his instincts about people are still reliable after all these years of reading faces across garage floors and highway truck stops. Smart man, your grandfather. Sounds like he taught you more than just how to fix engines. He taught you how to pay attention, how to care about doing things right even when no one's watching. That's rarer than you think, especially in someone your age. He pauses, studying Marcus's face with the intensity of a man making important decisions. I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to think about it seriously before you answer. Not just the job. Hell, you've already proven you can do the work better than men with twice your experience. I'm talking about something bigger. The garage holds its breath around them, machines and tools waiting in respectful silence, while Jake Morrison, Hell's Angel and mechanical philosopher and father who learned to love by example, prepares to offer a homeless teenager the kind of opportunity that can rewrite the entire trajectory of a life. I've been thinking about succession planning, he continues, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent building something worth preserving. Not immediately, mind you. I've got plenty of good years left in me, but eventually I'm going to want to step back, maybe spend more time with Sarah and whatever grandchildren she and her husband decide to bless me with. This place, everything I've built here, it needs someone who understands that fixing motorcycles is about more than just making money. Marcus feels the ground shifting beneath his feet, not the unstable shakiness of uncertainty, but the solid movement of foundations being laid, of possibilities opening up like engines coming to life after careful attention to all the small details that make the difference between running and running well. You're talking about, he begins, then stops, afraid to put words to hope, in case speaking it aloud breaks the spell that's brought him from Seattle's cold streets to this warm garage where he's spent one afternoon and already feels more at home than he has since his grandfather's funeral. I'm talking about teaching you the business, Jake says simply, his eyes holding the certainty that comes from recognizing fate when it arrives wearing work clothes and carrying a backpack full of nothing except the willingness to help strangers. Not just the mechanical side, you've already got that figured out, but the customer relations, the accounting, the vendor relationships, all the boring administrative stuff that keeps a place like this running. I'm talking about giving you something to build on, something that could be yours someday if you want it, if you're willing to work for it. He gestures around the garage with the pride of a craftsman showing off his masterpiece. This place has been good to me, given me purpose and pride and a way to support my family. Maybe it can do the same for you. The offer hangs in the air between them, like a bridge spanning the distance between what Marcus's life has been and what it could become, and for a moment, he's overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of possibility, the dizzying prospect of having something to build toward instead of just surviving from one day to the next. He thinks of his grandfather, who would have understood exactly what Jake is offering, who spent his own life believing that good work done with integrity was its own reward and that passing knowledge to the next generation was the closest thing to immortality that most people ever achieve. Why me? Marcus asks, his voice barely above a whisper, because he needs to understand what Jake sees that he himself has never been able to recognize in bathroom mirrors and storefront reflections. I'm nobody special, just a kid who got lucky that night at the gas station. There have to be plenty of people with more experience, more education, more... He trails off, unable to articulate the sense of unworthiness that's been his constant companion since the day his mother chose heroin over her son and left him to navigate the world with nothing but his grandfather's lessons and his own stubborn refusal to give up. Jake's smile is gentle with the wisdom that comes from having been young and lost and convinced of your own unworthiness before life teaches you that worth isn't something you're born with, but something you build through the daily choice to keep trying, keep caring, keep believing that tomorrow might be better than today. You want to know what I saw that night? I saw someone who had every reason to walk away, every excuse to mind his own business and let someone else deal with an old man's problems. But instead, you chose to help because helping was the right thing to do. That's not luck, son. That's character. And character is the one thing you can't teach, can't fake, can't buy at any price. He leans back in his chair, his eyes taking on the distant look of someone accessing memories that still have the power to change his expression. I've seen a lot of people in my 63 years on this planet, worked alongside men who could tear down an engine blindfolded and rebuild it better than factory specifications, ridden with brothers who would die before they'd let you down. But you know what the rarest thing is? Someone who helps because they can't help helping, because something inside them just refuses to walk past suffering when they might be able to do something about it. His weathered hands gesture toward the photographs on his walls. Decades of faces and stories and moments when the choice between selfishness and service defined who someone really was underneath all the leather and attitude and protective coloring that people use to survive a world that often rewards hardness over kindness. My daughter Sarah, she's a social worker now, works with kids who've been dealt the same raw deal life handed you. She tells me stories that would break your heart. Teenagers aging out of foster care with nothing but garbage bags full of clothes and the kind of anger that comes from being passed around like unwanted furniture. Most of them, they learn to take what they can get and trust no one, because trust just gives the world more ways to disappoint them. Jake's voice carries the weight of a father who's learned to see the world through his daughter's eyes, to understand that some kinds of damage take generations to heal. But every once in a while, she meets a kid who still believes that people can be good, still chooses kindness, even when kindness has never been chosen for them. Those are the ones who change everything, Marcus. Those are the ones who break the cycle. The words settle in the air between them like a benediction, and Marcus feels the weight of recognition, the strange burden of being seen clearly by someone who understands what it costs to maintain hope in a world designed to extinguish it. I never thought of it that way, he admits, his voice barely above a whisper, because the idea that his actions at the gas station might represent something larger than simple human decency is both frightening and oddly liberating. I just saw someone who needed help, and I knew how to fix motorcycles. It seemed like the obvious thing to do. And that, Jake says with the satisfaction of someone who's just proven an important point, is exactly what makes you special. The obvious thing for most people would have been to keep walking, to assume someone else would handle it, to protect themselves from getting involved in a stranger's problems. But you saw someone who needed help, and you had the ability to help, so you helped. Simple as that. He reaches into his desk drawer and pulls out a manila folder, thick with documents, spreading them across the desktop with the ceremony of someone revealing important secrets. This is what I've built here, Marcus. Not just a business, but a family, a place where people who understand machines can make a living doing work that matters, fixing things that are broken, keeping people mobile and independent and connected to the roads that call to them. The September evening settles around them like a blessing, and Marcus Chen, 17 years old, homeless no more, mechanical prodigy and unlikely heir to a legacy built on chrome and steel, and the belief that broken things can be fixed if someone cares enough to do the work, feels something inside his chest that he thought had died with his grandfather. It's the warm expansion of possibility, the recognition that some stories end with redemption instead of tragedy, that sometimes the kindness you give to strangers comes back to you multiplied beyond anything you could have imagined. As Jake locks up the garage for the night and Marcus climbs the stairs to his apartment, with a bed that doesn't require checking for needles or broken glass, with a door that locks from the inside and windows that look out on a world suddenly full of promise instead of threat. He whispers a prayer of gratitude to his grandfather, to Jake Morrison, to whatever force in the universe sometimes rewards acts of grace with grace returned. Tomorrow he'll wake up in the same place he went to sleep. And the day after that, and the day after that, building something permanent in a world that had convinced him permanence was just another word for the things other people got to have. The neon sign across the street flickers like a lighthouse guiding travelers to safety, and Marcus falls asleep to the distant sound of motorcycles on Auburn Boulevard, their engines singing the mechanical lullaby that promises morning will bring new challenges to solve, new machines to heal, new opportunities to prove that broken doesn't mean worthless, and that sometimes the most unlikely angels wear leather jackets and know exactly how to change a life with nothing more than the willingness to see potential where others see only problems. In his dreams, his grandfather's garage and Morrison's motorcycle repair merge into one perfect space where love lives in the sound of engines running smooth and true, where every day brings the chance to fix something that seemed beyond repair, where home is wherever people choose to build something beautiful together, one careful adjustment at a time.